Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Hi, my name is Nicole Mason. Welcome to Woman Up, Advance Your Career Advocating for Workplace Innovation. Uh-oh, and my computer just decided not to like me for a moment. Sorry about that. So, what is this presentation about and who am I? I am an attorney. I'm a woman in tech. I've been an attorney for tech companies throughout the years. And what this presentation is really about is how to advance your career in a way that works for you, your life, what you want in both your career and your personal life. I'm providing some tips and anecdotes to help you shape your career and your work environment in a way that not only suits you, but will so you can provide value to your employers, to people you do business with. And I also have a bunch of data that I'm going to share. I'm peppering this presentation with data that I've collected while I wrote my book. So you can share with others when you are when you're advocating for yourself and what you want in your career. Because really there's a lot of data out there that supports the benefits of flexible work arrangements, having women in tech and throughout the management chain. So I'm going to share a bunch of that data throughout this presentation. And also, I want to go over about how to be an effective change agent. I've been an agent of change throughout my career, and I've seen and experienced what works and some things that don't work, and so I'll be touching on that as well. And I'd like to provide inspiration to all of you for striking the work-life balance, whatever that means to you, because it means different things to different people. It even means different things to the same person at different points in their life. I know work-life balance has meant different things to me over the course of the years. And so I hope to inspire you so you can have your work-life balance. I am a middle-aged woman. I am married. I have a 3.5-year-old son. This is a recent picture of us on vacation in Japan. Work-life balance has always been really important to me. And it used to mean earlier in my career, when I was younger, it meant having time to do lots of fun and exciting things, travel the world, climb mountains, ski, do stuff outdoors, scuba dive. So when I was younger, I was working my way up the corporate ladder and also having a lot of fun. And then eventually later in life, having a family became important and a priority for me. And so work-life balance meant a different thing, and it meant family. So short story about my experience. You've heard a little bit about me personally. Professionally, I started out as a lawyer practicing law. What's not on this slide is actually that I started out in litigation. I, 20 plus, a little over 20 years ago, came out to Silicon Valley. I'm not originally from Silicon Valley, but I've been here long enough now, over 20 years, that it is definitely home. And I started out at a small business boutique law firm that did both litigation and transactional practice. So I did both when I was at that law firm. And the transactional side, this was in the mid-90s. It was the first tech bubble boom in Silicon Valley. And I was outside counsel to a number of really interesting tech startups with lots of different technologies and interesting things that they were working on. And I was also litigating, doing business litigation. And I quickly learned, within 2 years actually, that while I thought I really wanted to be a litigator, I had the opportunity to be a litigator, and I even had the opportunity to do a trial. I was the lead attorney trying this case for our client. There were a couple of other co-defendants, and I actually won the trial for our client, helped the co-defendants win their cases, and their attorneys were far senior to me. I was definitely the youngest person in the courtroom, and I looked even younger than I actually was, and felt no joy when it was done. I mean, this was a great accomplishment. And if all I cared about was if I never stepped foot in a courtroom again, I could not be happier. And that's when I realized litigation is not for me. I should probably go in-house. And I did. And that really started my career as a woman in tech. Once I went in-house to a telecom technology company. They were the first really to do mobile Wi-Fi. And they were here in the Bay Area. And that was a great initial introduction to technology companies. I was working side by side with the business to help grow this company. I was developing processes. I mean, it was a very high growth startup company. And I was able to get a lot of great experience. Did that for a few years, and when I was young and scrappy, and then went into Sun Microsystems, who's now part of Oracle. And that's really where I grew up professionally. I got a lot of great mentoring and training there, including management training. Although I had done management at the telecom company, I was really an individual contributor that had management responsibilities thrown onto me, and I was just making it work, like a lot of managers do. And it was really at Sun that I realized, there's an art to management. And that was an area of growth for me. And it was great to get that management training while also developing my technical expertise and practicing in a lot of different areas of law, supporting different areas of the business at Sun, doing intellectual property, supporting sales and marketing, got international experience, did legal operations, did a lot of different things at Sun. It was great. I was there for nearly 5 years. And then things had changed. I joined Sun actually right before the bubble burst. And so while I was at Sun, it was a very different environment, shrinking environment. And after 5 years there, it got to a point where the growth opportunities were no longer there. And I was very focused on advancing my career. And I tell this story really to make it interesting and hopefully informative for, just a path. Take what you hear and hopefully apply it to yourself and your situation, and how you can use these stories to advance your career. And by the way, this is not going to be all about me and my stories. I'm going to get to some data really soon. But then I realized that there were no professional opportunities to grow myself anymore, and had the opportunity to go back and work with people from the telecom company that I was with before Sun. Now there was this different telecom company. A lot of those people had stayed in telecom and were now at this company, and they invited me to come work with them. Really important to develop relationships as you go through your employers and your employment experiences. And it was a great opportunity. I was able to move over into a business role and do government relations, business development type work, working with a great team and growing my own team and achieving some pretty impossible targets. And after 4 years of that, I knew that I wanted to do other things with my career, and the growth opportunities weren't there at this company. And so I was able to take a general counsel position at a software as a service e-commerce company, multinational. It was obviously a lot of lawyers who are working in-house want to someday be a general counsel if you're wanting to grow your career sort of to the top, if you will. And so I could not pass up that opportunity, did that for about 4 years. And all the while, I was able to have a work-life balance as I was advancing my career. I negotiated flexibility that I needed to make sure that I had weekends to myself to do the fun stuff on the weekends. I was able to negotiate always everywhere I went to negotiate to work from home for some time. And at Sun, I even proved the remote support model. I was able to demonstrate and develop a way for the company to give people opportunities to move around and support different areas of the world without having to move. So all this is where I come from with there's a way to advance your career. It's very possible to advance your career while improving the workplace and shaping it to not only suit you, but to be more innovative and more attractive to other great talent, which is a challenge that a lot of companies, particularly in tech, face. So Omnivantage Business Professionals, you're probably staring at that wondering, what is that? That is my business. While I was on maternity leave, I realized that I could not return to corporate and strike the balance that I wanted to strike for my family. And I'd been thinking about starting my own business for 6 years at that point. And so it just became clear that this is the time. It's time to start that business. My husband was supportive. And I did. And Omnivantage Business Professionals is the business that I launched over 3 years ago now. So I became a mom. I authored books, founded my company. The book that I authored on Enhance Employee Engagement is really the culmination of sorts of lessons that I learned about team building, engaging employees, setting people up for success, and contributing to companies, to employers, to really provide that value that they want from their employees, and to help teams do that as well. I was doing that all throughout my career, and it was when I sat back and thought, what will I do with my own business? That's where I decided I wanted to focus, because I felt that I could do a lot of good in that area. I had a lot of proven experience in that area, and I'm passionate about it. And I had theories that I had developed over the years about what works and what doesn't to engage employees and to make teams work better. And I researched to validate or not my theories. And it turned out that all the things that I had taken as truths anecdotally from my experience and everything that I'd seen around me all those years in tech, I realized when I did the research, I found data to support these theories. And so this book is a holistic view of how to advance your teams, how to advance a business, how to contribute to a business, and all the different, every chapter covers all the different things that impact employee engagement, employee productivity, employee performance. Because everything from the processes that a company has, to the company's culture, to the diversity that a company has or doesn't have, to the flexibility, the work schedule flexibility that's offered or not, all of these things, there are many different factors that impact negatively or positively employee engagement, and this book covers that. And I just call this out as a reference, but also, just so you understand, what my expertise is in this area of career advancement while striking work-life balance and innovating workplaces. I wrote the book, as they say. So here are some things that I learned while climbing the corporate ladder. And all of these lessons are supported by data. It's not just my experience. In other words, this is the experience that a lot of people, men and women, have. It's really important to advance your career to know your value, know what you bring to the table, and know your weaknesses. Where could you improve? Because we all have areas of improvement, and different experiences, different job descriptions, different roles will trigger different areas in which we need to grow. So it's important to know always, wherever you are in your career, where's your growth edge? Where should you develop your skills? What skills should you develop? And know what you want out of your career, out of your life, because, you know, our career, it's just a part of our life. And it's very important to know what you want holistically in every area of your life, in your career, in your personal life and whatnot. Because when you know what you want and you know your value, you can negotiate to get it, to advance your career in a way that works for you and your employer. It's key, in order to continue to advance, to deliver visible results. It's not enough to just do your job and do it well. You have to make sure that the people that make decisions in your profession and your employer know what you've been doing for them. So it's very important that you produce and that people see and care about what you're producing, the results you're delivering. It's so important to be flexible and adapt to change. Change is constant, and the more quickly you can embrace change, the more quickly you will advance. And if you are a change agent, if you're leading change, if you lead change in an appropriate way, and that's really key. You can't just be breaking china like a bull in a china shop. I mean, because that's one way to affect change, but to successfully drive change and really garner consensus and support, if you're that kind of change agent, you will advance very quickly in your career, in your profession, in your business, whatever you're doing professionally. And it's a two-way street. If you find yourself in an environment where it's rigid and there's no room, there isn't a give and take, it's just this is the way and do it this way and only this way, you may find that that's very limiting, and advancement opportunities may just not be available. So that flexibility, it needs to come from both the employee and the employer in order, for there to be success for the company as well as your career. Pay attention to what is going on with the people around you. I've noticed that everywhere I've been, when good people start to leave, it's usually a sign that there's a really good reason for them to leave, and it's not just personal to them, like a spouse taking a job in a different state kind of a thing. Many times when there's like an exodus, multiple good colleagues are leaving, it's time for you to pay attention and really assess, why are they leaving? What's going on with the company that's causing them to leave? Does this work environment still work for me? Am I still growing professionally? Are there still opportunities for me? It's a really good time to start asking yourself some questions. Here's a data point, and where this came from is back to working from home and remote work arrangements and flexible work arrangements. I've noticed that just because people come into the office, the people that are always in the office, in my experience, are many times not the most productive people. And what I've seen with my teams and other teams that I've interfaced with is many times the most productive people are those that are kind of working from anywhere and wherever and odd hours, and you don't necessarily know when they're going to be in the office, but you know that they're getting stuff done. And it turns out that there are studies about this, and one prominent study has shown that 60% of employees who are in the office spend half of their time in the office on non-work related activities. Not very productive. This is a data point that you can use. in your negotiations or your discussions in trying to shape your workplace for, your own work arrangements as well as that of your team. And, if you're at an executive level, if you're in a position to set some policies, this is a really useful data point for the flexible scheduling. Flexible work arrangements often do yield higher productivity, and there's data around that, which I'll get to a data point later in this presentation. And the foundation, the thing that one must always do, everything else sort of builds on this, is you need to know how to manage up and down. What does that mean? It means communicating effectively with your management, with your manager, with your manager's manager, on up the chain. Really important to constantly, in addition to doing your work, be communicating your value up to the decision makers. If you have a team that you're managing, it's very important to manage that team. That doesn't mean micromanage. What that means is be aware of how they're performing, be aware of what their needs are. What do they need to get their jobs done? Are they set up for success? If you just sort of take a very completely hands-off approach, like a lot of managers do, either because they don't know how to manage, or they're scared to manage people, or it's really just not their interest, which happens a lot in tech. A lot of times in tech, you get these engineers who are great engineers, and that's what they want to do. They want to do their very technical role. They don't want to manage people because they don't know how, and they're very uncomfortable with that. And unfortunately, that really impacts negatively productivity and effectiveness and success of the team, and ultimately the company, when managers aren't managing their people to make sure that their people are on target for their goals and set up for success and have what they need, and so on. So it's always important to ask these questions of yourself, of your team, of everyone in, at different times in your professional environment. Progressing towards your goals. Are you progressing towards your goals, both professional and personal? Goes back to, is your job working for you as well as you working well for your employer? Because you may be progressing your employer's goals, but if your life is falling apart, that's not going to last very long. It's not sustainable. Do you have the resources that you need to succeed? Does your team have what they need to succeed? And have you communicated with those that need to know? Like, if there are resources that you don't have that you or your team need to succeed, have you communicated that to those that are in a position to do something about it? Have you communicated what you've done, what you've achieved, what you've contributed? Communication is key to that, managing the people in your professional circles and your career. Have you identified challenges and solutions? One of the biggest complaints that managers make is that their employees come to them with nothing but problems and just dump problems in their lap. It is really important to take ownership of your obligation to be, if you want to be successful and advance your career, to be a solution finder, as someone that can not only identify, hey, there's an issue, but here's how to solve it, or here's a way to solve it. Always important to do both. And are you taking care of yourself? This, again, work-life balance, it's the linchpin, really, of employee productivity, performance, and engagement. If we don't have our life in order, eventually our career isn't going to be in order either, at least not the way we want it to be. So it's really important to go to the doctor's appointments, get some level of exercise, all that stuff, right? Whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, get a certain amount of sleep in order to keep going and continue to contribute value and be productive and do all of the things that you want to do in your career and your life. and contribute. A good test is, especially in tech, we kind of all feed off of stress. We're kind of stress junkies. It makes a lot of us go. At the same time, there's a point of diminishing returns where it's too much stress. It's breaking us down. It's no longer motivational. It's no longer driving us up. It's driving us into the ground. And so a good way to understand, how stress is serving you or disserving you is to do a little comparison. What's your stress level versus your happiness level? Because if you compare your amount of stress to your amount of happiness, that can be very telling. If all you have is stress and there's no happiness, you're burning yourself out. Why are you doing it? Whatever you're doing in your profession, in your career, whatever particular job you have as you're on your trajectory, always good to check in with yourself. Why am I in this role now? Why am I at this company? To make sure that it's what you want and that it's serving you. And the more, honestly, the more that your work situation serves you, the more you're probably serving your employer, your business, whatever, the more you're delivering. You're providing more value if you're getting served in providing the value or while providing the value. So it's really good to always be in touch with, why you're doing whatever it is you're doing professionally. And what are your highest priorities? This goes both for managing your workload. It's really important to be able to prioritize because we all have a lot coming at us professionally and in our jobs, and we need to prioritize. We just simply can't do it all at the same time. So it's very important for that stress level as well as your effectiveness and productivity to be able to prioritize. And then also in the area of self-care to prioritize, okay, when do I need to prioritize me over work? Because there are times when you do need to prioritize yourself or your family over work in order to keep going and, again, perform. And what's the feedback you're getting from those around you? A lot of times, we may feel that we are doing a great job and everything's fine, but if there's a perception and something that one of my managers shared with me, and it was a really great mentoring moment, was that perception is reality. So if others are seeing something about you and the way that you're being that you disagree with or you disregard as, well, but I perform or whatever, you need to pay attention to the feedback because it is a reality that in your work environment that you need to deal with. And that doesn't mean that you need to accept it. It may be a reality that you realize, oh, that's the reality. This work environment doesn't work for me. Time to move on. Or it may be, oh, this is reality that's teaching me this is a growth edge. This is an area I should and want to develop in myself. So it's good to pay attention to the feedback. All necessary to advance our careers. So why do I do what I do? Why am I giving this talk? My dream is for a truly inclusive workplace. What does that mean? It means that there will be widespread acceptance and adoption of flexible work arrangements to enable the work-life balance, because there's a lot of imbalance in tech right now. Imbalance in terms of gender and other diversity, and certainly imbalance on the work-life balance front. And it doesn't need to be that way. And actually, companies will do a lot better, will be a lot more profitable, will attract and retain top talent more successfully and easily, reduce expenses, and so on through widespread adoption of flexible work arrangements, which takes a lot of different shapes. There's no one way to do flexible work arrangements. Another sign of inclusive workplaces, obviously, is a merits results-based advancement system. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, and we all know that that's unfortunately often not what exists currently. I want to see more women in tech with equal pay, and not just tech, but in business at large, especially in upper management and board seats. I want to see less harassment and less just biases coming out through stereotyping and the way that we get treated. I have certainly been subject to a lot of stereotypes and circumstances. I mean, it's run the gamut. You don't have a career in tech and advance through the echelons in Silicon Valley without pretty much seeing it all and experiencing a good deal personally as well. And it just doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't help anyone for it to be this way. And so when there's a time when we can all go to work feeling comfortable and feeling safe and feeling respected, that's when we'll have truly inclusive workplaces. When men and women can actively work together without feeling threatened by each other, because that happens, I think, a lot, where a lot of this conflict and the biases and whatnot happens because people feel threatened by each other. And it's not just men feeling threatened by women and women feeling threatened by men. It's people feeling threatened by each other. Women are often threatened by each other, and same with men. And so really it's about everyone working better together. And that's where the workplace innovation opportunity is. It's in helping everyone work better together. And you can do that individually. It just, you can be that agent of change that in your interactions with your team, with the people that you work with, you can do things to make the workplace, the corporate environment, the tech and business environment more inclusive. And you can do this. One way is to promote, and this is the way I did it, is to promote more flexible work arrangements, which HR often refers to as WorkFlex. And it's the thing about WorkFlex and flexible work arrangements is it is one solution that can solve a number of different problems that companies, particularly in tech, are having today. WorkFlex will increase retention, especially for women. A lot of women exit the workplace because they no longer have the flexibility that they need to be there for their families and that work-life balance. It will certainly increase productivity. People are less productive oftentimes when they're in the office, as statistics show, and certainly not productive when sitting in hours of traffic every day. And will certainly improve performance as stress levels go down because people don't have to go through the stress of a long commute every day. You better believe their performance is going up when their stress level is down. And inclusion, of course, when you make the work environment more accessible to a broader range of people, it becomes more inclusive. And that will solve a number of diversity problems. You can lead by example. I did this. I always negotiated flexible work arrangements for myself, and I provided it to my teams. And every company I was with, I set the example of this can be done because I'm doing it and my teams are doing it, and we're performing. We're hitting our targets. We're exceeding expectations consistently everywhere I went. And you can do that too. And it's good to find like-minded people in your work environments, in your profession. Find other engineers, find other lawyers, in my case, find others who have the same mindset about what they want to see in the workplace, and organize. You can organize internally in your company to start a committee, to just, it's sort of your voluntary extracurriculars on the side and on top of, in addition to your work. If you want to take it on, you can take on a project, an initiative, and launch something new at the company that could, if it's proven, if you prove that it'll work at that company, it will become policy and get adopted. I've seen it happen. I've done it, and I've seen others do it. It's a really effective way to be a change agent, is to lead a voluntary initiative like that with others. You can start your own group if you have your own team. Start with your team. It's a really easy way. You as a manager, if you're a manager, you have a good amount of discretion typically to determine what are my team's work schedules, how is my team going to work, and you can start with your team to prove to a larger organization what can work, something different, and perpetuate it that way. Persistence is really key. Change doesn't happen overnight, and change comes with resistance. It's natural and human, and you just have to count on it that when change is happening, people are resisting. And people resist change out of fear and also a host of other natural emotions and reactions. And it's critical to just keep going. There's analytics that say it takes 7 exposures to something before somebody will even act, and that's at a minimum. So inertia is something that can only be overcome with persistence. I mentioned earlier that change, because people resist change, you don't want to be a bull in a china shop. And there are a lot of mistakes it would be wise to avoid in being a change agent and advocating for workplace innovation. It's really important to understand optics, going back to perception. Perception is reality. And what this is how things appear if say, for example, you're letting your team work from home a lot. There's a balance to be struck. You may know that your team can work from home, say 40% or more of the time, and get the job done and get it done even better than they would if they weren't working from home that frequently. But if you're starting to get feedback from management that this doesn't look good, people are uncomfortable with this, you need to take that feedback and dial it back a little and go slower. Because a lot of decisions are made on the basis of people's beliefs and perceptions rather than hard data and results, unfortunately. Lack of consensus. It's really important when driving change that you have some support and that and consensus grows. It starts with a core, and then that core group can develop some more proof points and more people come on, and so on. And that's really what I mean by getting consensus. Is it doesn't mean you have to get everyone on board from the get-go. It just means that you need to understand that there needs to be a certain amount of support to get the momentum going, to develop some proof points. And when you've developed some evidence that this change is good, more people will come on board. And that is what you want to strive for. Again, office dynamics, you have to understand the culture of the particular company that you're in when you're approaching change. And because you can have a specific change that you want to drive in mind, but the way that you approach or affect that change should be guided by the office dynamics, the office politics, the culture, because there are lots of different ways to get to a goal, and you want to find the way that's actually going to work where you're having to work it. A lot of times initiatives fail and career advancement fails because you're shying away from the difficult conversations. It's human, and there are different personality types. Some people are just naturally conflict avoidant, and some people just naturally don't have any problem with conflict and and are too conflict driven. But there's a balance to be struck. It's really important to, if you are a conflict avoidant person, to shift your mindset around those difficult conversations, and think of them not as conflict, but actually as bridge building, because that's really what they are. If there's an issue, that issue will only fester and grow and get worse if it's not addressed. And there's always a way to address it without really going at loggerheads with someone. Don't tolerate bad behavior or abuse. We as women especially, oftentimes we tolerate more than we should. And it's very important to know your limits and to be very clear on your values and what you think is appropriate and what you're willing to accept, and not accept something that you believe for yourself is unacceptable. And then there are some very bright lines that nobody should accept, and sometimes those get tolerated as well, as we've seen in the news lately. There's just endless examples of abuse happening out there because people tolerate it for some time before it becomes intolerable for them. And in my view, it's best to nip those situations in the bud. As soon as you see something that is inappropriate, it's best to do something about it. What you do about it, there's a lot of different possible actions. You don't necessarily have to confront the person. You can just decide, I don't like this. This is not the environment for me. Or you may decide that, this is a really good job. I like everything about this company that I'm working for. I like my work. I'm not going to walk away from this. And then there are things you can do to address it. You don't have to tolerate it, though. And it's important for your career advancement not to tolerate it. Always critical to seek advice, especially when there's a challenging situation that you don't necessarily know what to do about. Go find some trusted person that you can talk with to get advice about how to handle the situation, whatever it is. And this will help you advance. So here's the data. I promised you data. Remote workers are more engaged than employees working on site. Why is this? This is because they are in more control of their time, and they're more productive because they have control over when they're going to do what. If it simply doesn't work for you to sit in 4 hours of traffic every day, 2 hours each way, that's going to impact your productivity. And if you have the opportunity to eliminate that 4-hour commute, you better believe at least 2 hours of that time you're going to give to your employer. That's what happens. That's what the data shows. That's what this data comes from studies that consulting firms and organizations and universities do by surveying corporate employees. So this is real data from corporate employees across industries. It includes the tech sector, but it's not exclusive to the tech sector. And it only takes a 20% increase in flexibility over one's schedule to significantly boost engagement and productivity. And then there are studies that talk about what is the relationship between engagement and productivity. More engagement, more productivity, up to 43% more on average. There are a lot of different studies. And what's interesting is, while there are a lot of different studies on the same questions, the numbers tend to be within 5% of each other. So the data is actually very consistent on the relationship between engagement and productivity and flexibility, schedule flexibility and engagement. Also on this point, there's very consistent and a lot of data about the fact that most women leave their jobs and exit the corporate environment because they don't have flexible schedules in their corporate job. That's why I left. And that's why I researched the data, because I thought, is this just me? Or, how common is this? I had to think at the time that it was pretty common from everything that I'd seen over 20 years. I'd protected other women's jobs when they became pregnant and their managers wanted to fire them. And I'd, worked with a lot of women who had become parents eventually, at some point in their career path. And so it really wasn't a surprise. It was a relief, actually, for me to see that this is an epidemic, actually. This is why lack of flexibility is why we're having less women in tech and in management, because by the time women get to a certain level in their career, they need and demand the flexibility in their life for that work-life balance that they need typically for their family. So solve the work flexibility, the scheduling issue, and a lot of this will change. Companies with higher than average employee engagement levels make a lot more money. This is just one data point. There are many other data points that are consistent with this particular one on this point. And again, I'm providing this data so you can take it and use it when you become a change agent and when you have the conversations at your companies as you negotiate in the advancement of your career and negotiate your work arrangements, and also for your team. 1/3 of the workforce participating in this particular report cited flexibility and lifestyle, work-life balance, as the number one decision factor in who they were going to work for. Work-life balance is the number one concern, according to this study and others, for employees when they decide who they're going to work for. So if you're a company and you want to attract top talent and retain top talent, flexibility is going to help you do it. And lack of flexibility is going to get in your way. The key to lasting change, because it's one thing to make a change, and to sustain change is another level and requires a degree of commitment, to say the least. And it's also about bridging the knowing-doing gap. How many times do we know something, we're supposed to do something, we know what needs to be done, but we don't actually do it because a lot of things get in the way. Policies can get in the way, inertia gets in the way, it's endless. And that's why it does take a commitment to change. And in the corporate environment, that commitment really does need to come from the top. to sustain it. How many times does this sound familiar? You've identified an issue. You've had a consultant come in and train you and provide information and do an analysis of, okay, and make recommendations. This is what needs or can be done, should be done to solve the issue. And then nothing gets done with that information. Really common. I've seen it all the time at companies. It's a way to advance your career is to be that person that steps up and ensures that that information gets used and drives an initiative to help the change happen and facilitate the change. It's a great path to career advancement. It's a great way to get noticed by management and rise up in the ranks because people really respect that and appreciate it when it's successful. And then how many times have you seen an initiative launched, where, okay, we got the data, we know what to do, we're doing this, and it fizzles, it flops, and no change occurs in the end. That usually happens because of poor change management and resistance to change that naturally occurs. And sometimes there will be some incremental change, but the issue still persists because I talked about how change starts small and it grows as more consensus is gained more widely. A lot of times change gets stuck at that small initial stage, and the proof points aren't communicated in order to, and driven in order to expand the consensus in order for change to really take hold and sustain. And that's, again, because behavioral change management is usually what's missing. Change management means different things to different people, and it's really, when it's successful, it takes into consideration behavioral habits that companies have, the policies. It's very holistic approach that needs to be taken in order to do behavioral change management, holistic change management that actually allows and facilitates lasting change. And the other thing is operational considerations need to be part of the change management process. And operations, in my view, it's 50% people and 50% process. A lot of operations folks look at just process data metrics, and that's key, that's important. But the other half of the equation is people and their habits and their behaviors. And operations, in my experience, in order to be done effectively and successfully, includes both. So here's, for visual graphic people, here's a graph of the relationships that I've been talking about, how flexible work arrangements will drive inclusiveness and diversity, that drives employee engagement, that produces and drives productivity and performance, and it's a cycle. And it's important to have the whole wheel. Take out one of those pieces and it's not spinning anymore. It's incomplete and it breaks down. And the flexible work arrangements help to retain employees, attract a broad candidate pool, and provide a meaningful competitive benefit and perk. And that will drive the inclusiveness and diversity where women will stay. And when they've reached that, their sort of highest performing, most high value because of all the experience and knowledge that they've gained over the years, that's usually the point where right now women are exiting. They'll stay and contribute more and continue to contribute and be role models for more women and advance and perpetuate this inclusiveness change that we want to see in the workplace. And that will, of course, drive more employee engagement, where employees are more motivated and they produce more and they contribute more. And there are reduced costs that go along with employee engagement, because when employees are more into what they're doing, there's reduced absenteeism, less turnover, less conflict. All of those things cost companies a lot of money. And of course, you get to retain your top talent. And that will, of course, drive more profitability because of the increased productivity and performance. And not to mention the reputation. I mean, especially now we have Glassdoor and all sorts of social media. Information is just out there. People know where are the good places to work, and consumers are voting with their pockets, with their dollars. And increasingly, companies that don't treat their employees well are getting bitten in the market, and people don't want to do business with those companies increasingly. So this is good, and it's important. It'll become increasingly important given the generational values. We can thank the millennials and Gen Y, who's behind them. There have been studies on the generations and the values that they hold, generally speaking. And the millennials and Gen Y behind them are very focused on social justice and reputation, all of these values that the younger generations hold are going to feed into these changes. And the faster companies get on board and really see that this is the wave of the future, the more these changes are going to become important to companies. And if you're the change agent that's helping them achieve the goal of keeping their business alive and increasing their profitability and keeping top talent, if you can help your company do that, you will benefit from it personally in your career. So in my book, ENHANCE is actually an acronym for a model. This is just an outline of an engagement and performance model, the factors that need to be covered and addressed throughout the organization, throughout any organization, in order to successfully engage employees. And it's important to eliminate performance hurdles, which includes corporate bullying, harassment, lack of diversity. All of these things are lack of engagement, obviously. Eliminate these hurdles, these things that get in the way of peak performance. And that's the first step for a company to succeed. Notice organizational and individual strengths and weaknesses. Harness your people's talents. Have accountability baked into your performance metrics and your performance measurements, and how you evaluate your people. Navigate change. It's important that companies change, and it's important that companies and people inside companies communicate. There's really almost no such thing as over communication, and communication is often a problem inside companies. There are communications breakdowns all over the place, and this actually contributes to a lack of engagement. Employees are always frustrated when they don't know something that they should have known, and it impacts their success. Then they're not able to do what they should be doing because they didn't know about something that they needed to know in order to successfully perform. And then, of course, execute and evaluate. So obviously, this is just an outline. If anybody has any questions, wants to know more, you can contact me. Feel free to link in with me. Feel free to email me. Feel free to ask me about any of these topics. And at this point, I am happy to take questions. Would love to take questions.
Thanks so much. This has been a fabulous presentation, and I know lots of people. I'm going to be pointing a lot of people to this presentation, because I know change management and behavioral management are just such an important topic right now, especially in places like Silicon Valley. So I just love the way you frame this, and I think it's going to be incredibly useful, and I know people will be also wanting to get a copy of your book. Something that I've noticed, so I was a woman in tech, and then I started working for organizations who are trying to increase the number of women and girls in technology. And recently, working on diversity and inclusion strategies, I see that there's the flexibility in work is often co-located with bad behavior. So especially in Silicon Valley and especially in engineering groups, they seem to walk hand in hand together. And maybe part of it is, I'm hypothesizing that maybe, like you said, the stress of having to have your butt in the seat for 50, 100 hours a week is adding to the bad behavior paradigm. And so that's making the environment rather hostile. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's a lot of things. I mean, wow, I've having been in Silicon Valley for as long as I have, I've actually seen the environment here radically change. And I've seen it through boom and bust, and now boom again. And during the bust time, the environment actually was better. And now that it's booming again, and it seems to be booming a little bigger than it did during the mid-90s boom,
yeah,
the behavior seems to be even worse.
Yeah. Well, and I think the Great Recession really kind of nailed the coffin shut, because what happened is companies were of the opinion, well, people aren't going to move because of the recession. And so what you saw is people spending longer and longer periods of time at one employer because they were worried about losing their jobs. And so it kind of created this Thunderdome effect in some of these organizations. And they're still reeling from that.
Yeah. And it's interesting because even now, companies feel like it's okay to cut corners on employees because they're not going to go anywhere, because things are still unstable, layoffs are still happening, and now funding is getting tighter for the startups. And so the more established companies, and I hear it around the Valley all the time, in corners with employees because they can.
Yeah. So I think we're both in agreement. And so as I was looking at your diagram, I wrote it down, the workplace innovation relationship. I was almost seeing, as that's spinning, there's kind of this counterclockwise diagram of the circle of, not allowing people to be flexible, cycles of bad behavior, innovation and productivity going down. It's kind of that downward spiral, the inverse of what you're proposing. And I see that in a lot of companies where, companies are losing market share and they're wondering why. And I'm looking in their organization going, well, dude, you have programmer Thunderdome going on in your organization. It's no wonder no woman is going to stay in there in her right mind, right?
Well, exactly. And that's the thing, especially with programmers, they can easily work from home and be very productive from home. And if you want to keep your women or attract women and you have that bro thing going on inside your office, this is a way, if you say to women, hey, you can work from home, they get to do interesting work, they will be productive, and they don't have to deal with the bro culture.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. Just completely fascinating. And, another dynamic that I wish we had time for too is the whole global thing, which is adding a whole nother layer of complexity on your flex work, because oftentimes these women, especially in managerial positions, are finding themselves on the phone with India or Asia, in the middle of the night or early in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it's creating huge barriers to that flex work that they need.
Well, and what I say about that is flex work is already happening because of the global economy and the global workforce. People are having to manage remote employees anyway, and are managing remote employees because they have team members that are in other, whole other sides of the world. And so, you're doing it anyway. Why don't you do it for your people locally as well? It will help them manage the odd hours that they need to keep to communicate and work with their colleagues all over the world. It makes it a lot more palatable and doable to keep weird hours when you're able to, during sort of the more normal hours when you typically be expected to work, not have to work, because it's acknowledged. Oh, you worked in the middle of the night. And yeah, it's natural that you're going to want to do that from home, or that you'll need to do that from home. And so, the expectation on the flip side should be you can't work 24/7, and unfortunately, where technology should enable and allow more flexibility in people's schedules, what it's doing instead in tech in the Valley especially is working people into the ground, because the expectation instead is, work 24/7 because you can.
Exactly. You're on all the time. I mean, you get emails in the middle of the night, on the weekends. There is no downtime. And I think you hit the nail on the head, especially with the recession. I think people's hours have just stretched and stretched, and there's no boundaries anymore on when you can take time off. Everyone's expected to be on all the time, and I've talked to a number of women who they're just starting to try things like everybody in their team gets one night off where you don't answer email, and then everyone else covers for them. I mean, they're just now getting to those kinds of things to try to bring some of that some of those boundaries back.
And it is incumbent upon us, as individuals and employees, to set boundaries and set expectations with our employers, to say, I'm not going to be available in this window of time. And I have found that with most managers in most places, if you do that, if you communicate, you can't just disappear and not respond. You have to let people know, set the expectation, you're not going to hear from me during this time. And when people do that, it works. And so it becomes incumbent on people to be more proactive and assertive, to set boundaries for themselves.
Yeah, this is really important, and to do it early, because what ends up happening is you see your windows shrinking, and then next thing you know, you're in the vortex of working 24/7, and you don't know how you got there.
Exactly. True.
All right, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I hope that we can continue this conversation on our Facebook group and in other places as well, because I think you're really onto something important that the women in technology need to understand and to negotiate as part of their career trajectories.
Yeah. Really want to help people. I feel it's so important, and I feel so fortunate that I was able to make it work for myself, and I know that it can work for others, and I am here to help.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Nicole. And again, I'm going to put this recording up on our website. It should be up within an hour or so, so people can have access to it. And I definitely will be pointing a lot of people to this presentation. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Take care.